Welcome everyone, this is Andre's Restart, and today we're talking about the best possible Nintendo Direct in the month of February. That's right, I still think a Direct is happening this month of February. Some people have been debating if there would even be a Direct in February, and we have entertained the possibility of us maybe getting a Nintendo Direct Mini instead of a full Direct, but I am thinking we are getting a Nintendo Direct in February for a number of reasons. And so we're going to be talking about why there's likely still going to be a Direct in February, when this Direct is likely going to happen based off historical precedent, what we should maybe expect from this Nintendo Direct, and also a rumor that seems to coincide with a lot of predictions. And so that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me point out that we are aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers. So if you do enjoy my content, please subscribe and hit the notification bell, leaving a like is also super helpful, and enjoy the ride as we talk about Nintendo every day. So first, let's address this concern about there even being a Direct in February. And the reason why some are sharing concern about a Direct happening is because we've been getting some trailers lately giving us news about Nintendo games. Like we got a Mario vs. Donkey Kong trailer that announced more levels in Mario vs. Donkey Kong, this remake. It's going to have some brand new original content. And then even more recently, we got this trailer for Princess Peach Showtime, which is showing more transformations, including Cowgirl Peach. So it's more info about Princess Peach Showtime, and some people are calling for this to all be the Twitter Direct. And so, because we're getting this influx of social media announcements, people are thinking there won't be a typical Nintendo Direct in February. But this, I believe, is not the right expectation. And there's a few reasons why. One, Nintendo makes announcements about their games throughout the course of the entire year. So there will be news about their games in January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, all the months of the year, even December. Not the last couple weeks of December, and maybe not the beginning of January, because a lot of people go on the holidays for Christmas and the New Year's. But pretty much every single month of the year, Direct or not, there will be announcements for different video games, and that's just how it is. But sometimes people argue when we have certain Nintendo game-centric announcements, like the big published Nintendo titles, that suggest there won't be a Direct. But history shows that this is not the case. Here are some recent examples though. Last year, February 2nd, we got a new trailer for Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe that was announcing this really nice, really awesome Welcome to Merry Magoland epilogue adventure, new content for this remaster, the newest part of Return to Dreamland Deluxe. And then 6 days later, we got the Nintendo Direct on February 8th, despite this big announcement. But perhaps what's even a better example of this was back in June of last year. So in June of last year, many people were wondering about when we might see the next Nintendo Direct because there was no E3, so Nintendo wasn't being held to a specific time, so they may have been more likely to do things, well, at a different time. And that is what happened, but the Direct still happened in June, just later into June, June 21st, as opposed to like the first or second week of June. And people were doubting this though, because we saw trailers for NSO games coming in the beginning of the month, and also a new trailer for Pikmin 4, yet the Direct still happened. So a few good Nintendo announcements happening in January, or even the beginning of February, does not really suggest in any way, or shape or form, that a Direct won't be happening, because we have all of this history suggesting otherwise. I could do other years, but this video would then get extremely long. You can look for yourself. All the evidence is there. But something that I think is perhaps a more fair concern to have is whether we're going to get a big general Nintendo Direct in February or just a Nintendo Direct Mini. And the reason why I think this is more fair is because there's all this talk about Switch 2 happening in the second half of the year. And so the bulk of the big announcements for Nintendo this year may be in the second half. Or rather the actual releases, and we may not see those announcements until later into the year. And considering what we already know for this first half, we have the first 3 months already accounted for, Nintendo really only has to make some announcements for games coming out April through July at the latest, really, because we typically get that June Direct. And Nintendo already has 2 announced games that could come out during those 4 months. One being Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, another being Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, and both games have already been rated by the ESRB, suggesting that they're pretty much primed and ready to go, and so Nintendo can easily slot them into these 4 months of the year that Nintendo likely needs to make some sort of announcement for in a Direct in February. But since we already know about them, getting more info on them probably wouldn't justify the Direct being anything more than a mini. If Nintendo announces maybe another remaster and a remake to fill up the other 2 months, then I don't think we're looking at a general Direct, we're looking at a Direct Mini. Nintendo might even just use a Splatoon 3 side order DLC as the content for a particular month, and that's perhaps even less significant of a release, because it's just DLC. So maybe we just get a Direct Mini. But a couple things I'll mention here. One, during that example I laid out, I operated under the assumption that we would just have one sort of significant Nintendo published release per month. But there could be more. And 2, I still think there's reason for Nintendo to have major announcements in a Nintendo Direct, even with Switch 2 potentially being announced as early as this March. So last week we made multiple videos, there's a lot of news, some really great investigative work that came out from Super Metal Day 64 about Metroid Prime 4. We saw QA testers through LinkedIn profile listings, we saw Retro Studios being a client for Next Gen Dreams, and then once all this info came out and was prevalent and being discussed, it was all taken down. So it looks like Nintendo is trying to cover up Metroid Prime 4 being ready for release almost. If they've been QA testing since March of last year, then the game has likely just been in the quality phase for a while already and could come out this year and possibly shown in a February Direct. Now some may argue, well, Prime 4 should be saved for Switch 2 at this point. I do think there's a very strong chance Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a cross-gen release tied into the Switch 2 launch window. But if this is indeed going to be the case, perhaps it makes even more sense to showcase Prime 4 before the Switch 2 reveal. Because Prime 4, similar to other cross-gen situations from Nintendo like The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, is a game we've been waiting for a very long time. And those games we already had trailers for before they announced the next-gen version of it that had some improvements in some way, shape, or form. And so perhaps it makes sense to announce Prime 4 beforehand so we're aware of this before they announce the cross-generation enhancements. But also, when Switch 2 is showcased, perhaps the real big reveal outside of the system itself is the next 3D Mario. And maybe Nintendo wants to space out their big AAA game announcements so one doesn't overshadow the other. And so with all that in mind, it may make even more sense for us to see Prime 4 in a February Direct, even though I still will acknowledge the possibility that Nintendo may still decide to save Prime 4 closer to the reveal of Switch 2, if not when Switch 2 is revealed. So I still think there's a chance that we get a Direct Mini, but if something like Prime 4 is going to be shown, I think that more strongly suggests we're going to get a major Direct in February, not just a Mini. And some other possibilities I'll note here. We're still waiting on something Donkey Kong related. With the park opening this spring, something likely should come soon. There is a Fire Emblem remake that's been rumored for quite some time. I've been personally expecting it to come out maybe in the beginning of next year, but it could drop at any point. And there's also been a lot of talk about Star Fox lately. I put out my own video where I mentioned a number of things that strongly support the idea of a Star Fox game being in development. But this week, even more details have surfaced. We've seen a trademark open up for Star Fox, and also people have been discussing info that's actually been out for a while already, that Star Fox has been in the code for Nintendo Switch Sports. So it looks like Nintendo's been working on something Star Fox related behind the scenes already. So when you factor in these details, along with all the other things I discussed in my video about Star Fox already, I'll have that in the iCard and also the end screen, so check that out after this one if you want to learn more about a potential Star Fox game. Star Fox could be a potential announcement in a Direct in February. It's just a possibility though. We may have to wait a while before we see this Star Fox game. It's possible it's not actually even in development, but I think there's a really good chance it is, and so it's something worth mentioning at least. And another thing I'll throw out there is that we could see some type of Zelda announcement. Most years we have some sort of Zelda news, and I don't think 2024 is going to have really big Zelda news, so we might have something smaller instead. And that potentially could be Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD, or maybe something 2D Zelda related. I'll point out Nash Weedle, who is a debated insider. I think they're pretty good, but we don't know for sure, so definitely it's a rumor, take it with a grain of salt. They did tweet CZR 2024, which seems to be a cryptic hint towards something Zelda related. Maybe C standing for Collection of Zelda Remasters, and so maybe we do get a Wind Waker Twilight Princess HD collection. But another possibility is maybe a 2D Zelda game. I've been debating some sort of Capcom Zelda remake in 2024. Those of you may be asking, well, what about the Ocarina of Time remake you've been talking about like crazy lately? I think that's happening, but I also think that something's being saved for Switch 2 and something likely to come out later, like 2025. So it's not something I would expect to see in a February Direct that will likely just be focused on Nintendo Switch. So these are all possibilities. But let's now get into when we expect this Direct, and then I'll get into the rumor. My expectation is February 7th, a Wednesday in the first full week of February. And there are several points of data that suggest that this is the most likely time. First off, most February Nintendo Directs happen on Wednesdays. In the last couple years, those Directs have happened on Wednesdays in the first full weeks of the month. So, based off the last 2 years, February 7th seems to be the date. But also something else about the last 2 years. We've had Q3 earnings releases happen just a few days before the Direct. Last year, the earnings release was on February 7th, and the Direct happened on the 8th. And then in 2022, the earnings release was on the 3rd, and the Direct happened 6 days later on the 9th. This year, the earnings release is on the 6th. So, maybe, again, we'll have a Direct the day afterwards. It's certainly possible. The last 2 years would be suggesting this. But this is all just based off the last 2 years. It's possible, like other years during the Switch era, it happens in the second full week of the month, which would position us for a Direct on February 14th. And I think that's a strong secondary option. But I will point out, February 14th is also Valentine's Day. Does Nintendo care about Valentine's Day? Will they want to have the Direct before a holiday like that? It's possible. It definitely strengthens my belief that February 7th is more likely, but I also don't think it's that big of a deal. Nintendo's had Directs on basic holidays before. Not really big important ones, but smaller ones like that, it could totally happen then. So my prediction is February 7th, but February 14th is a decent secondary option. But I mentioned a rumor, and so let's talk about that rumor. The rumor is not what you might be thinking. It's not this rumor that's been circulating lately with this 4chan leaker that predicted some correct things about Princess Peach Showtime, and then also said other things like Metroid Prime 2 Remastered, Donkey Kong Country for the 30th anniversary, Fire Emblem Remake coming out in May. These are all things I think are solid predictions, but just that. And so, Kremlin campaigner at K-Roll Country pointed out that the leaker probably just got the Princess Peach Showtime stuff correct, because if you look at the Princess Peach Showtime stuff we already had evidence for Ninja Peach and Cowgirl Peach, because those symbols were there in the hub theater area already. So with there having already been public evidence for the single prediction they've gotten right, there really isn't much to take away from this. But the actual rumor is coming from Necrofelipe, who responded to this thread here in relation to this leak probably being fake, and he says it's false because next DK will not be country. And so this is something I've largely speculated for a while already. The next Donkey Kong game is not going to be a country game, and I agree with that. If internal Nintendo is supposedly working on this game, why take it away from Retro Studios, for example? And if this Donkey Kong game is not going to be a side-scrolling Donkey Kong game, then also, why call it country? That doesn't make sense. So I'm not saying the next Donkey Kong game is going to be a 3D Donkey Kong game, but this would bode well for it to not be the typical side-scrolling Donkey Kong game, we've gone with the Country series. Now, for those who are unfamiliar with Necrofilipe, he is the editor-in-chief at Universal Nintendo, who is considered to be a pretty reliable source. Of course, until things are confirmed, it is a rumor. Take it with a grain of salt. Things are subject to change or misinterpretation, so we gotta take it with a grain of salt, even if it is a legitimate 100% true source. And so maybe we see the next Donkey Kong in the Direct. And I didn't mention this, but I think Metroid Prime 2 Remastered or Metroid Prime 2 and 3 in some way, shape, or form being ported to Switch make a lot of sense, especially if Nintendo's about to showcase Prime 4. But we'll see what happens. So what do you think? Do you think there's going to be a Direct Mini, a full Direct? Will we finally see Prime 4? Will any of this relate to Switch 2? Let me know in the comments below. This is Andres Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.